Here we go, how to spark a revolution. You are experiencing history's highest rate of change, disruption, ambition, and opportunity. There's never been a better time for you to innovate. And you're capable of more than you think. You're capable today of anything you could dream. But most people don't realize this is a new era. This is not the time to preserve the status quo. It's the time for action, for ambition, for taking risks. This is the time to push yourself because nobody else will, because nobody else controls you. So be bold, pursue your dreams, design your own future. Now's the time to push your limits, to get out of your comfort zone, to make change happen even if it seems hard. Because I need you to take the leap. I need you to break your own rules. I need you to push harder, to act sooner, to never give up. If you want to get better and faster, be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy. And remember, you don't need a big idea, you need a little idea that you can make big. Be revolutionary. Who here likes disruption? Okay, but here's the catch. We love the word disruption, but there's a weird fact that in 10 years, 40% of the Fortune 500s will not exist in a meaningful way. Basically, at this point in time, you are at a crossroad where you have a decision of how to look at this. This is either a tragic risk or it's an epic opportunity. Regardless of which side of the fork you're on, it's clear that now is the time for action. So with that said, that's why I would like to teach you about how to spark a revolution. And I believe it breaks down into 4 key components: purpose, symbols of change, tactics, and finally you need action. So we're going to dive into each of these. Long ago, for about a decade, I was a ski racer. And skiing, when you're going 80 miles an hour, you don't really have time to plan. Instead, what you're taught was realizing that you don't expect things to go to plan. Instead, you plan for the unexpected. This is probably what led me to a fascination with the wonderful world of scenario analysis. So Pierre Wack was a guy that was hired by Royal Dutch Shell to be their futurist and to predict what oil prices will be. And it's actually a pretty easy job. Because guess what? Oil prices were, for the last 20 years, $20. Oil prices will probably be $20 next year. And if you make that prediction, you will keep your job. But Pierre Wack went to his managers and he said, I think there's a possibility that the nations, which would now be the OPEC cartel nations, could get together and form a cartel. I'm not telling you they will. I have no reason to suspect it, other than the fact that I would do it if it was me. And a year and a half later, OPEC cartels formed, and oil would eventually skyrocket to $100, disrupting all of the competitors except the one that prepared. Royal Dutch Shell went from number 7 in the world to number 2 in revenue, but number 1 in profitability, because they were the only ones that had planned that alternate scenario for action. You are not preparing for what will happen. You are preparing for the potential of what could be. Let's get into purpose then. There are 3 dimensions of purpose. You must have passion, you must inspire urgency, and finally, you have to actually have importance. So let's talk first about passion. What is it that you're trying to do? Why should I belong on your team? What's the mission that you're giving me so that I can feel great about why I'm going to invest the next decade, 2 decades, my life, helping you to win? As you think of framing that, I'll give you a couple quotes. Castro said, I began the revolution with 82 men, and if I had to do it again, I would do it with 10 or 15 of absolute faith. So one way to not have any critics is to just not do anything new or interesting. And impossible isn't a fact, it's an attitude. So this leads us to the second dimension of purpose, which is urgency. I would argue there has never been a better time for urgency. There have never been more examples that you can use to impress upon your team why now is the time for action. And when we went through the examples of disrupted companies earlier today, it's so easy to dismiss them. But I want to explain a little bit more, because these companies, these brands have similarities to every brand in this room. the top talent. The best people in the world worked for those brands. They could have any Harvard MBA that they wanted. They had the best customers. They had long-standing relationships. They were admired brands. And they were aware of new technology. In fact, they weren't just aware of the new technologies that would disrupt them. Ironically, they invented and pioneered the very technologies that would take them down. So why does disruption happen? Disruption happens in 3 phases always. In the first phase, you've got a small competitor. You don't really worry about them. In the Smith Corona example, the small competitors, Atari, Commodore, eventually Apple, there's people doing little things with the computer, but who cares? The second phase that always happens is the competitor starts to grow in their own little niche. And finally, there's the knockout punch that nobody sees coming. There's a partnership, an acquisition, a sale. Interestingly, you can't tell what's disrupting you so easily from the inside because you assume you have control. But from the outside, you and I can explain to almost every industry what will disrupt them. So you need to try to look at your market from the outside in. Take times like this, take workshop opportunities like we'll do tomorrow to add up all the facts in your industries and literally think about how you're being disrupted, or collide with other people in a room like this where you can ask them what they think about your industry. The thing about these 40% of companies that will fail is I can tell you which ones they are. So after writing the book, what happened is I got this rare opportunity to hear from CEOs and brands what they were concerned about, where they thought they were failing, which they obviously don't publicly note. Then we started following that up with workshops where now the responsibility was to make programs and get deeper into the psychology of why things weren't working. And then, of course, with the research, we've done a couple thousand custom reports now, so we know what all of these brands are actually trying to do and where they're going. I believe there are 3 types of companies, and you could classify them based on their self-perception of performance. There are the companies that would tell you they are troubled. There are those that would say they're doing well. And there are those that are paranoid. So the quiz question for you, which are the companies that you think are most likely to fail? Yell it out loud.
Doing well.
Doing well. Pretty nice consensus. And here's how it actually plays out when I look at a couple examples. Domino's Pizza. We started working with them around 2009, and at the time, I'm not going to reveal anything confidential, by the way, but that's the public market. They were down 90%. This creates one of the companies that's now insatiable to try and figure out what it is they can do to reinvent. So they start doing things. They start letting you order without actually making selections like we did today. They start letting you order with an emoji. That makes no sense, unless you're at one of these hungry companies who's trying to reinvent. If you were at a brand that was doing well, your emoji idea would have to go. Fast forward in time, $10,000 invested 6 years ago would be $500,000 today, but it's an example of how a company that could be troubled is more willing and likely to try things. Next, you get to the paranoid companies. At Zara, they're testing 500 new dresses and garments every 2 weeks. Adds up to 11,000 new tests a year. They're so paranoid, even though they're number 1, that they need to try everything. Then you get to the companies that self-perceive to be doing well. And this is the problematic area. Because when you're doing well, all the farmer traps we talked about today kick in. Companies that think they're doing well are more likely to be protective, repetitive, and complacent. The third dimension of purpose is importance. For Mark Zuckerberg, he said, in a world that's changing so quickly, the biggest risk you can take is not taking any risk. So pick an audacious challenge. Pick something bold. There's a lot of cool research where if you try and get your team to increase their goal by 10%, then you'll increase by 10%. But if you say, how do we actually do this to a level that's 10x, then they'll figure out how to get you to 3x, 4x, or maybe even 10. That's how you get to disruptive thinking. The 3 dimensions of purpose are, you must inspire passion, you must create urgency, and you must signal importance. And this brings us to symbols of change. You're trying to make change happen. The number 1 conversation I've had with everybody here at Future Festival is, hey, I'm trying to get momentum back home. But how do you get that group of people who are repeating last year's strategies, how do you get them to open their mind to the potential of what could be. I'm going to show you someone who's had to tackle a challenge or two that's a little bit bigger than the ones we deal with, and then we'll dial it back. There's this guy named Louis Gerstner. And one day, Louis gets a phone call, and his call goes something like this. I wasn't there, so I'll just make it all up. Hey, yo, you want to be CEO? And Louis goes, yeah, just a sec. And he takes 3 days. When he goes and he investigates the company, IBM, he looks at their stock price, and he thinks, okay, that's not so good. And he checks them out, and they're losing $2 billion a quarter, coming fresh off a $9 billion annual loss. So this is not a super job opportunity when you think about it. I don't want to be the last one known for destroying an icon. And so when the call comes back, hey, checking in, you want to be a CEO? He says, no thanks, okay, bye. And then the other line voice says, well, actually, I'm Jimmy Carter, and I would like you to do this to save an American icon. Okay, former president. All right, got it. Okay, I'll do it. So he takes over IBM. But when he does, he says you can understand a lot about a culture and an organization by their word choice. And I choose my words very carefully. And in his first month or two, and he's studying this new role as the outsider at a company where people are depressed and upset, he pays attention to word choice. Eventually, he creates a memo. He writes 2 emails in his entire decade tenure at IBM. And his key email gave a list of what we currently say and what we will say. We currently say product. We will now only say customer. We used to manage to morale. Now we manage to succeed. We used to conform. Now we wish for diversity. We used to value me. Now we value the whole. And we used to make decisions when we knew things were 100% correct. But now we will make decisions based on an 80-20 rule. So he forces this out to the organization, and then he checks in with someone in Europe, and he finds out that they are not cognizant of his email. And if you only sent 2 emails in your decade at a tech company as CEO, you want to know that people read them. It's only 2 emails. So he finds out that the president, or the EVP who runs Europe, didn't forward on his email. So he says, okay, I'd like you to come to the US. I just want to have a meeting. We'll get some business done. Guy shows up in his office, and Louis says, don't block my email. Okay, we're done. What do you mean we're done? It means you can go home. So, guy goes home, and shortly after quits. But that's kind of like the move where they say if you go to prison, you knock out the big guy when you're there. That's a pretty quick signal where he's showing you, yes, I sent you that email. It's important. Nobody blocks it if they do. I'm flying them around the world to tell them not to. And, shortly after, we see a little bit of change happening. Louis Gerstner would go on to do what is well known and accepted as the greatest corporate turnaround in all of history. When he reflected back on his success, which is where we get to the most important lesson, he said culture is not just one aspect of the game. It is the game. All of this then brings us to our third note on how to spark a revolution, which is where we're going to get a little tactical. Michael Jordan knows how to play basketball because he practices, he trains, he assesses, and he keeps on improving. The great investors of our day know how to invest because they study everything, they read every book, they study the markets, they have a method and a process, and everyone's game moves up. So when I talk to you about trying to become disruptive, I want to give you a bit of a playbook. The patterns that we've learned from our study of big data. There are 6 patterns. They break down into actually about 2 or 3 dozen sub-patterns, each of which could actually give you a new inspiration for whatever market you're in. We also overview for the first time our 18 different drivers of change, the most powerful drivers of megatrends in the world. First, let us talk about acceleration. Within acceleration, there are 3 megatrends that we've studied. In the morning, we talked about acceleration as perfecting one thing, exaggerating something, reimagining, or creating something aspirational. The 3 megatrends related are catalyzation, prosumerism, and artificial intelligence. Let's begin with AI. This AI robot is driving a motorcycle. You've seen IBM Watson. Here's the cool thing, though. I found that the BBC actually made a website along with Oxford University and a study they did to find out if a robot will replace your job. So in the spirit of that, let's play a little game of safe or not safe. perhaps with some of the roles in the room. A salesperson, is their job safe or not safe?
Not safe.
You're absolutely correct. Researchers, safe or not safe?
Not safe.
Okay, completely safe. But I then, after I saw that, because I went through the full list, I decided to figure out who made the study, and I pulled him up on LinkedIn. There's Michael Osborne, and I checked out how he describes his role. He's a researcher! Guys, researchers will be totally safe. It's fine. It's cool. Tax experts, not safe. IT engineers, surprisingly, not safe. Pub owners, second safest role you can have, and that is my future. When the robots come, you can come to my little bar. We've talked about AI mostly in terms of how it helps with decision making, but when you augment that with things like maker culture and 3D printing, you get to a completely different world. There's also 3D printed bicycles, cars, houses. This is an actual 3D printed building in China. There's a 3D printed bridge, 3D printed shoes from our lovely clients at Adidas. There's casts, dresses, prosthetic arms, 3D printed food, and 3D printed body parts and organs. If this isn't something you've heard about, the Singularity, I'll just give you the little description. The theory basically goes like this. The accelerating pace of change combined with exponential computer growth leads us to the singularity, which is a period that is best defined in the following way. In 2015, the intelligence of a computer matches that of basically a mouse. By 2023, a computer's processing power matches a human brain, and by 2045, one computer has the processing power to match every brain, every person on the planet. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, except that. Just a total end of mankind. No big deal. No big deal. Stephen Hawking, what does he know? We are experiencing history's highest rate of change. So push harder, act sooner, never give up. Next up, we have reduction. And I'm going to talk about reduction and the sub-patterns you've heard, like specialization, fewer layers, even crowdsourcing. But I'm going to talk about more specifically curation, instant entrepreneurship, and simplicity. Curation in a cluttered world helps us make decisions quicker. This is Muriel Kashoten. It is a bookstore that has just one book. It all basically is inspired by the concept of Barry Schwartz and the paradox of choice. You've heard this concept. I just want to remind you guys of what the numbers are in case you haven't seen it or it's been a long time. Barry Schwartz had two different experiments that they set up. They were basically little places, kiosks in a grocery store where you could sample jams and then decide if you wanted to buy them. In one grocery store, there were basically 6 different jams to try, and in the other, there were 24. Everybody thinks the 24 jam display would be better, but just to give you the numbers to ground you on it, the 6 jams caused 30% of people to buy some jam, and the 24 jams cost only 3%. People become overwhelmed by choice. When it comes to reduction, it's not about getting a big idea, it's about finding a little idea that you can make big. Next up, convergence. Convergence, as you recall from the morning, can mean combining, layering, adding value, bringing something digital to a physical space, co-branding. The mega trends we see out of it are co-creation, hybridization, and multi-sensation. Let's dive into the first one. This is Yana and I dominating at real-life video gaming. It looks like it's just laser tag, but we are live streaming with GoPros on our head. Everything is gamified, so it's almost more fun for people to watch than to play. The extra sensation, there's projections, they're adding in augmented reality, but the key is, if you get shot, you do get electrocuted. Anyone want to get electrocuted? My next example is really fun. It is about co-creation and brands that are taking an extra step to provide their customers with the tools to co-create whatever it is that they might like. GoPro rocked into the scene with their little simple camera. Good example of simplicity. There were already dozens of camera companies, but GoPro is the only one that made its own editing suite and made available things like stock music, so you can actually upload your videos to YouTube or their own community. As a result, does anyone want to guess even a range? Tell me how many videos you think people uploaded to GoPro. Any guesses? Just toss some numbers out.
3 million.
3 million? 37 million videos like this. When you think about convergence, your next idea exists in some combination of things you already know. This brings us to cyclicality. Cyclicality is retro nostalgia, basically economic patterns, the way fashion repeats, but we specifically see a powerful factor of nostalgia that's existing today, as well as youthfulness and naturality. To kick us off, I want to show you the CEO founder of what is known, according to Fortune, as the coolest company on the planet. This is Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia. In the early days, people loved it. Everything Patagonia was awesome. So then they needed to scale up. They had orders 5-10 times more than what they could actually produce. And they didn't want to overproduce things that might be disposable. In fact, at that time, in the shareholder letter, Yvon noted, pretty intense, it's not the attainment of the summit, it's the style of the climb. This means so much to him that he even wanted to clarify, so he came out with a lovely statement that you should think twice before you buy a product from us. Do you really need it, or are you just bored and you want to buy something? Those are words, but you turn words into action and you get a cult following. They created something called Wornwear, which tours across America, and it's a repair shop. If you bought a ski suit from Patagonia and it's ripped or it's faded or something needs an upgrade, they will repair anything you have for free. These are examples of naturality in a company that's not just doing things that are cute for the environment, but one that is absolutely committed to a more sustainable world. All this brings us to redirection. Redirection is reframing, repurposing, surprising, or gamification. The factors in the megatrends of this world that we like the most would be tribalism, gamification, and experience. This is the Helix. It is one of Europe's most powerful, exciting, and fastest roller coasters. But the lineup is like an hour too long. That's a little bit intense. Unless you're playing the video game, because if you play the video game and you properly defeat your friends, you can abandon them to skip the line and get to the front. And that's a fun example of gamification. But what if you're in a world where maybe you're not doing something that's as exciting as a roller coaster? For that, I bring you how donations of blood work in Sweden. They've gamified donations by creating an app and a text messaging system where every time your blood is used to save a life, you get a text message about it so you know the story. For redirection, reinvent the possibility of what could be. Finally, I bring you to divergence. It's my favorite because it has to do with straying from the mainstream. It can be specialization, personalization, status, counterculture, and it inspires 3 megatrends that we've detected: authenticity, personalization, and many-to-many. Some of you have talked with us a lot about personalization, and we found examples for you on how to make your products more personalized. I want to show you a favorite from TAM Airlines.
We introduced a Facebook Connect during the online purchase process. This way, we got to know our passengers better, their likes, their photos, their friends, the places they love. This information was then used to create custom content for each passenger's onboard magazine. Their name turned into a color, or what happened on the day they were born. An article about those they love, or about their passions.
I love it, and it's like they show the 98 customers that say it's awesome, but they exclude the 2 that are like, this is really creepy. For divergence, basically, instead of marketing to the masses, you're trying to be irresistible to a specific group of people. With that said, I bring you our Megatrend framework, and tomorrow we will dive into these to teach you how to apply them to find your overlooked opportunities and your next big idea. All this brings me to my very final point on how to spark a revolution, which is that you need action. So should we learn from a criminal or Bill Gates? Criminal. This is Dave Dell. He lived the good life: fast cars, exotic dancers, police chases, crystal meth. And sooner or later, that adds up. And so he's in jail, and when he's there, he thinks about how different his life would be if he simply joined the family bake shop with his 2 brothers and his dad. And it was just a tiny little bake shop. He needed to make a difference when he got out of jail, but he didn't really know how, because he never paid attention to the family business growing up. So he looked at all the little things he could do. He made them organic, which gets people that like organic food. He made them local sourced with local delivery on bicycles, which gets the restaurants. He put solar panels on the roof, which gets the eco crowd, which is awesome because they don't care what the food tastes like. You all know it. Fair wages, which were popular in the Pacific Northwest, and he added an extra component of a social good aspect, which was that they would rehabilitate ex-cons, hire them, and pay them a fair wage, which is not something that happens. All of this drew a little more attention to them, so he made one loaf of bread with a shock brand. Shock brands were pretty hot at the time, and he called it, even though it never killed a man, Dave's Killer Bread. It's killer good. Say no to bread on drugs. Now, none of these individual ideas were the reason for success, but they add up and propel Dave's Bread, and pretty soon it becomes a $50 million empire. You increase your odds of winning by aligning to all of the little trends. And people often think innovation is about a huge eureka moment. It's usually something small and simple. And that leads me then to my final little example for you, which is the tireless tale of my exhausted coworker. She says, "I'm exhausted. Why? I've been running for like 3 hours. Why are you running so much? That makes no sense. Because I've been chased by zombies." Okay, now, again, basically, I know some of you are in disbelief, but you have to be worried about it because it's the doubters that get eaten first. At first, I didn't understand it, but then I remembered that 1,000,000 years ago, we invented fire. And it would take another 1,000,000 years before the next invention, which was farming 10,000 years ago. But soon after, fire and farming led to bombs, which led to cannons, which led to hand cannons, which led to muskets, which led to rifles, which led to bullets, which led to rockets, which led the Russians to win the race to space with Sputnik, which was soon orbiting in the sky around the world, beaconing to America, beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. As a beacon, as if to say, we did it, we did it, we did it, we did it. You didn't. So a couple Americans say, "Hey, yo, can we borrow that supercomputer? Because I think we can find where that beacon's coming from." They get access to the national supercomputer, and their boss says, "Yeah, I want you to do it because I got nuclear subs." "I don't understand." "Well, if we could take your idea and put it in the sky, I could find out where my subs are actually located." That's actually a pretty cool idea. Not just for the subs, but also for the Coast Guard, the police, and emergency rescue. Layer in a little bit of Google Maps, and pretty soon people are running around the world geocaching for hidden treasures. Smartphones come about, Google gets in the game, and now we have Google Maps, and we can find our way to this conference. Social media comes into play, Nike Run comes about. Now layer in AMC's award-winning Walking Dead, and you realize zombie fascination added into the mix paved the way for an app called Zombies Run to make a little app you download on your phone so you can listen to your music. And as you're listening, you keep getting interrupted by a narrator going, "I need you to move 300 yards further up front of the school. There's a horde of zombies chasing you." And with 1,000,000 people doing that, now I know why she ran for 3 hours. The interesting takeaway here is that no one person invents GPS. No one person invents Google Maps. No one person invents Zombies Run. We think of innovation and the word as this big thing where someone has a eureka moment, but actually innovation tends to be much smaller and more achievable. I also like to say no one person invented the iPhone. It's just a better BlackBerry. Shots fired. You don't need a big idea. You need a little idea that you can make big. Thank you very much, and welcome to Future Fest. If you'd like to learn more about innovation, download one of my bestsellers or the latest trend report absolutely free at jeremygutsche.com. Visit me at one of Trend Hunter's epic future festivals or join 10 million people getting better and faster with my other innovation keynote videos. Better yet, go to trendhunter.com to find the latest trends and learn more about our innovation accelerator.